Hi, and welcome to another episode of Truth Be Known. This is Lauren Baccarello, and today we're thrilled to be joined by Wendy Pfeiffer, CIO of Nutanix. For those of you who don't know Wendy, she's a real badass. She's worked in the technology industry for 3 decades and is one of the most respected leaders in tech. As CIO of Nutanix, she helps lead a cutting-edge technology company that provides a revolutionary multi-cloud platform. She's one of the world's leaders in understanding and effectively utilizing data and technology. So it was interesting to me that a good portion of our conversation actually ended up focusing on life during COVID and how she's navigating the challenge of educating children and keeping them engaged while being home with them. It really hit home to me, that human aspect of decision making. Data is wonderful in decision making because it can help us overcome some of our humanness. The data doesn't get stir crazy after a few weeks in quarantine. It doesn't have bad days, and it doesn't get bummed out by the weather and being stuck inside. But we're not robots. We can and should rely on data, but there's always going to be a human element to decision making. And what this interview reminded me is that it's okay to take time and make sure you're in a good place physically and mentally. I think that's especially important to keep in mind as we draw to the close of this crazy year. So with that, let's jump into the interview with Wendy. Welcome to Truth Be Known. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Truth Be Known. We have an incredible guest today, Wendy. For those of you who don't know her, she is one of the top 10 CIOs who inspire. She's one of the most influential women in business. Wendy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Wendy Pfeiffer, and I am currently the CIO at Nutanix, and I also sit on a couple of corporate boards. I'm on the board at Qualys and at SADA Systems, and I'm also a mom and married to a musician, so lots of roles and lots of fun in my life.
I love that. It is definitely the full scope and full breadth of life. So we've been having a great conversation. And I really want to talk to you about a few different things. Before we get started, I know you've got a really interesting background. How did you get started in tech? Where did this all come from?
Well, I am so old that when I got started, there wasn't like a career in tech per se. But back then, I loved math and I loved science. And way back when God was a boy and wore short pants, I was in high school, and I ended up getting a job at NASA Ames Research Center. And I entered a contest, I won, and I was part of the space biology research program. And I worked on something called cockpit displays of traffic information. And in order to do that, I had to use the supercomputers that they had at NASA. And it was just a revelation. Just every geek fiber in my body loved the notion of these large scale networks and these sort of amazing capabilities of this mass of networked machines. And so I knew I needed to be around that, and I needed to understand it, and I needed to just interact with it. And so that was the start. At the time, it was hard to find a career that was like, play with the computers at NASA. But over time, I feel like I've been able to fashion a career that's very interesting in tech. Ultimately, I've always gone to companies. I've always followed my heart and gone to companies where I believe in the product, where I can't let it alone, where it's the most compelling thing. Whether I worked at Yahoo or I worked at GoPro, or Robert Half helping people to find jobs, and today at Nutanix, I gotta love that product, and then applying technology to that product and to that business is my sport.
That's amazing. And for people who aren't familiar with you or don't know you, Wendy is known as one of the sort of the premier CIOs in tech. And if you need a massive shift in your IT organization, Wendy has the reputation for she is the person that you call, and she spends a lot of time writing about redefining the role of IT. I want to talk to you about something a little bit different, not just redefining the role of IT, but I want to talk to you about redefining the role of business. It is no doubt for anybody right now that we're in the middle of a Can we still say unprecedented? It's been 9 months.
Well, each new month is unprecedented. Yes.
Every month is a new level of Jumanji.
Mm.
But we are living through changing, challenging times that are redefining everything about who we are. And I think it's redefining business. And I would love to talk to you about, how do you think business is being redefined? How do you think the role of corporate America is being redefined right now?
Yeah, I mean, Lauren, first of all, there is there's a massive global tragedy that's happening as people are losing their lives, and families are being impacted, and societies are being impacted, and so that's the main thing.
Mhm.
Right after that, people are suffering extreme economic loss. And I was just talking recently with Mike Rowe, who was saying that 40 million people in the U.S. are out of work right now, who had jobs, at the start of this pandemic. That's a massive change. And in the midst of that, companies are, having to conduct business. Now, if you're lucky to be in an essential business, you're just flat out running hard. But
Mhm.
everyone else is having to place their business, their company, themselves in this new context. And we're having to think about resources differently. We're having to think about the resources, the space in our offices. I work for a tech company. We can all do our jobs 100% remote from the office. But I consume products like servers from companies that need manufacturing space. I eat food that needs to be, grown and processed, and put on shelves. And so there are physical needs for resources that have shifted dramatically. If we just look at the real estate market, what a sea change is going to happen there as companies, consider that their workforce can work remote from offices. And then in the midst of that, there are tried and true industries like the travel and tourism industry that have just been crushed. And other industries like tech, the one that I am luckily in, that are now central. And so as we think about the environment in which we live, we were living in a really different ecosystem. We were very different players in a different ecosystem, and I mean business in general. 10 months ago, the ecosystem is completely different now. The meteor or whatever it was hit Earth, and here we are, the last dinosaurs in the Happy Valley, saying, what did we use those buildings for? What was the purpose of that 2-hour commute every day? And then meanwhile, of course, we have shareholders, we have employees, we have customers who rely on that thing we do, whatever that thing is that we do. They need that. And now technology has become that intermediary. Technology is the way that we interact with those folks, and we give them that thing that they need. And so if you think about business that used to want technology to be invisible, or perhaps even non-existent, now needs technology to be the intermediary, and sometimes even front and center, and sometimes even the definition of the business. That is a massive digital transformation for sure. But then the other thing that's happened, back to the role of the leader, is I'll be honest. I'm a nerd for sure. I have talked more in the last year than I've talked in my life to anybody. We are not always high on the social EQ scale, but suddenly what we say and think and do is central to how businesses move forward, and other things, how schools move forward, and so on. And so we are having to think on a human scale about the use of technology to enable our business. That is complex, higher level thinking, part one. And part two, we may have built muscles around how to scale or secure or integrate technology. But not all of us have built muscles around, how do I delight a customer who is, trying to get access to medical information, or trying to figure out how to connect with, access to goods and services. That's possibly a new sport, new muscles for us. And so our learning, our progression as human beings and as technology leaders is writ large in society, right? It's on display, and it's not always pretty, but we're the best that we're the best option that many of our companies have. So we're learning in public. It's like being a teenager again, It's like all the zits and the arms and legs and elbows and knees, and all the awkwardness is just on display as we're trying to figure out, like, how do I become a member of this new society, and how do I at least not embarrass my company, but in fact, maybe I can differentiate my company, and then ultimately, how do I help people? And that whole thing, it's always been messy, but now it's concentrated in this crucible of the technology capability that we already had in place. And that's it. We've got a legacy, we've got a capability in place that is what we have to rely on to deliver. Whatever we stockpiled, that's what we're using.
And I think you bring up so many great points. And I even just starting with how fortunate you and I both are to be in the technology space right now. And as insane as our world and days are, we're in a far better place than so many of the small business owners who just thought they had a cushion but didn't expect 10 months at a third of their income, if they're lucky to have a third of their income for 10 months versus nothing at all. And we're living in this time where for every single person is going through their own degree of struggle. And I think you also brought up another great point of the role of IT is so much more important for every single organization now. It's not just for business. The IT administrator at a school might be one person who, has to, it sounds awful, but, help with a printer and maybe help with an email versus now that one IT person in a school is the lifeblood of being able to educate children, because if they don't have everything set up, teachers now can't teach remotely. And the IT org has to transform faster than ever, deliver flawlessly, and on a stage that is completely public with expectations they never had before.
Yeah, and I feel for those guys. I mean, I've actually been helping folks in school districts just figure out how to run. Thinking about Google, for example. Google's been offering Google Classroom for free to school districts and help enabling them to use them, and Zoom offering Zoom for free to teachers and school districts and helping them to use it. And we could give many examples. Nutanix offers this virtual desktop as a service environment for free, to folks who are needing educational assistance. That's all kind of cool. In fact, it's all really cool, and kudos to those companies for doing that. But at the end of the day, there's some poor person in what is, at the end of the day, a consumer environment.
Mm-hmm.
You and I are talking over public internet, Wi-Fi, in our homes. We are relying on. I'm using my kid's gaming computer because, let's face it, like, everything about it is better than my work computer. If this doesn't work, I'm gonna flip over to my mobile phone and use cellular network. So we're in this soup of consumer tech and public tech and enterprise tech and school district tech and all that, sort of all mixed together. That's very complex. That would be complex under normal circumstances. but we also are operating in hybrid mode. We have, some people back on campuses and some people back in businesses and especially critical industries. And, I mean, we're talking at 2:30. I think my kid is already sucking up all the internet bandwidth for his game because he's done with his day. So we're in this mix, and in this mix, um, not all the technology plays well together either, and that is a little bit overwhelming, and that's a little bit confusing. And the things that we used to have in IT and in companies, we used to have walls. We used to have security. We used to have controls. We used to be able to declare standards, and if hey, if you don't have standard equipment, we don't let you use it. If you don't, right, none of those crutches exist. In education is another great example. The kid either shows up to school or she's absent. Now,
Now she could be playing a game in the middle of class, which is why she's not on camera. Not that I know anyone that's done that.
right, exactly. And at the same time, our employees are in some version of that as well. And so now we're having to measure productivity, to be creative about measuring productivity and engagement in different ways. And let's face it, many of the technology components that we use to run our businesses were not developed to be engaging. Were not developed to improve human productivity. They were developed to perform a process, to accomplish a task. And so, if performing that process and accomplishing that task is difficult or frustrating or overwhelming, then what happens is that affects employee engagement, that affects employee productivity, that affects student engagement, student productivity. And so, a kid, turns off their camera and looks away if the teaching is not engaging. And teachers are having to be creative and thoughtful about how to engage their students. And by the way, students aren't engaged by being lectured to, they're engaged by engaging, by sharing their own viewpoint. That's a complicated thing to manage. Same with us in companies. How do we continue to have these conversations over technology, which is at the end of the day two-dimensional? It's two-dimensional no matter what. It's single threaded no matter what. You're having to be quiet while I talk. I have to stop talking to hear you. And in a crowded room, in a meeting, it's not quite that way. There's more layers. There's more optionality, and at the same time, there are different sort of things needing my attention. You and I are talking, I'm making eye contact, you're making eye contact. That's pretty cool. But like right over there is my other computer, and right here is my mobile phone. And in the midst of all this, we have lots of different things that want our attention, not the least of which is my new cyberpunk game. Far more interesting than finishing my budgets today. And so we also need this kind of weird level of like self-discipline and focus. And there's something about our job as technologists that require us to figure out how to deliver that, how to deliver engagement and productivity and focus in the midst of this rich optionality and capability that is the consumer environment, where everything was developed to keep the eyeballs and keep the attention and be addictive and be easy. And you get in just with I use this example a lot, but it is an IT leader's dream to be able to someday launch something like Pokemon Go, where with no instruction, a completely unique use of technology, a completely unique use of augmented reality, and a way to use a mobile phone that was never used before. You download the thing. It was like 10 million people downloaded it in like the first day.
Mm-hmm.
There's no five-minute video snippets that taught us all how to use it. Right away, you're catching all the Pokemon you can.
You
Like,
download.
how did that happen? And why don't we do that? Like, why wasn't like Zoom that way? Like, are you kidding me? Or why wasn't, a Microsoft Office that way? No, like it takes all this training. And why is that? And how can we address that before we go into this next complex mode going forward, where we take this messy group of people and capabilities we have, and we walk into the future, whatever that is, where we're bringing all these modes together again in the next hybrid mode.
It is. And it's this interesting idea of the consumerization of enterprise IT apps, because in our personal lives, which used to be more separate from our work lives, you had, to your point, beautiful user experience. Everything just works. At least on the application layer, technology was getting closer to a consumer level user experience. But now that all day, every day, we are surrounded by all of the consumer applications that are drawing our attention, that are built to draw our attention, plus the home lives that we are managing in the background or in the foreground, depending on the time of day. And then we have the actual enterprise apps that we're supposed to be working on. It's a very, very different world. And it makes me think a lot about this idea of, when we're back to work, when we are back to work, when the world is quote unquote normal again. And I know you're like me, and we keep hearing about people saying, well, I can't wait for the end of the year. January 1st is coming up. I can't wait for the end of 2020. And January 1st is a concept in our minds. And this is the really tough part, and I wish wasn't true, but January 1st will be the same as December 31st. The world, it's not that we wake up and things are different, but it's this proverbial idea of a new start. And if I think about that new start, we want things to be different. We want things to go back. We want the world to be what it was. But what this has taught us is everything is impermanent. And I want to think about what does moving forward look like? Not the actual January 1st, the actual day that's happening shortly, but this proverbial January 1st. And how do you think we're all going to be moving forward and thinking about moving forward when the world progresses back to normal?
Mm-hmm. I think about this all the time, and with humility, I don't know. I'm a little frightened. I worry that I myself may not be up to the task as a leader or as a parent or as a member of society. Um, I think, the future's always been unknown. We know that, right? But I think the challenge is that we've already experienced a shift in our very way of being, whether that's as companies or as leaders. Our way of being is different. For a while, we were people who work in offices who were temporarily working remotely.
Mm-hmm.
We're not anymore. Now we are people who work. And we have developed a way of working that's ideal for us right now. And the fact is that there were some things about working in offices that were not ideal.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want those. We don't want to do those things anymore. We've changed. And so if I think about my company as a whole, if I think about the thousands of people who work at my company, every one of them has changed. And so what I can tell you is I know some things about the future of work. One thing is that there will need to be massive optionality. There will need to be something that back in the 1980s we called mass personalization. We will need to have a work environment that's a lot like the personal, the consumer environment. If I have Facebook on my mobile phone, I don't say like, well, that's it. Facebook is my standard for social networking, and therefore I could never use Twitter or that's ridiculous. I actually have a range of tools that I use, and I use my own brain and my own choice and my own timing, and I have different modes and different needs and different audiences. And all of that correlation and that integration and that optionality is handled by my brain.
Mhm.
And there's no company that's telling me how to do that. It's sort of my choice. That mode of of working is what we're doing now, and we're going to need to ensure we have some, if not a lot of that going into the future. We'll need that optionality. We will not be able to enforce standards. We will not be able to enforce, I don't even think, schedules. People have gotten used to different schedules, and because of that, we also will need to figure out ways of enabling collaboration in endlessly hybrid mode. People will be using different apps.
Mhm.
They'll be in different time zones. This other major thing has been happening. People are moving. People are there's a population disbursement. I keep a map of where all of my people are logging in from, just to make sure that is working, right? Um, and I've got, I don't know, 91 countries that our employees are logging in from every workday. That's a massive sort of movement that we'll need to continue to support. And so there's infrastructure. We've got to have hybrid clouds and hybrid infrastructure, and there's an immediacy. There's a 24/7ness, but there's also something else where we have to engage with our employees and with our students in designing how they work, how they think, how they interact. They have to have inputs. There have to be interfaces and inputs that allow people to have that choice and that control over how they engage and when they engage, and therefore data has to be available. People might be multitasking, and we need to have separation. We need to have security. Our interaction design needs to accommodate asynchronous communications. And these are, any one of those things is a kind of a heavy lift. All of those things together are the essential ingredients for the hybrid future that we're already living in. But if we don't make substantive progress in all of those areas right now, while people are, you know, dealing with this next wave of the virus and they're already overwhelmed and they're already tired, if we don't make progress right now, if we don't head in that direction, then we will not be able to kind of pull ourselves up from the bootstraps, or with our bootstraps. I think there's an expression in there. Uh, we won't have the capability to deal with the complexity moving forward.
Oh,
Um, so I think we know some things to do, but now we've got to do them all, like all of them. We have to do them all.
and I feel like that just leads to the sort of that constant pressure and workload of there's so many things we have to do, and are we, and as an IT leader in an IT organization, are we set up for the future? You are the in the IT organization, is that in so many organizations unappreciated organization behind everyone else's success that probably didn't get as much, front of house credit. But now it is, the whole world has changed, is still changing. We're all working from home today. At some point in the hopefully not so distant future, we will be released from captivity, but not everyone at the same time. And I don't know if you've started to notice this, but I've started to notice this. I am a very outgoing social person, but I can't handle being around people for the same amount of time I used to be.
It's
And
exhausting, right? It's exhausting. Yeah,
I'm desperate for human interaction, but I can't have too much.
right.
Where before it was fine. And I don't even think we've seen the full impact on who we are as people, our ability to interact,
Mm.
because we haven't been released from captivity to know that if we even have social skills anymore at scale. So where you're building for this future, it's not a flip the switch, we're all back in the office, say hello to your commute again. It's you're at home, you're in the office. Maybe you're in the same location, maybe you're in a different location. And the times of day we work no longer exist. And if you have a meeting, if you have to homeschool your kid from 8 to 8:30, that's what you have to do now, and there's no longer the option. And I feel like that is an acceptable part of reality that everyone is dealing with that I don't think is going to go away. So as an IT leader in an IT organization, uh, how do you think about building for an even more complex future than we have right now, and setting up your company for this future state?
We can't do it alone. We have to do that in community. Uh, I don't think that IT as a standalone organization can lead and execute on this profound transformation by ourselves. We have to certainly be the experts in terms of technology, but we need to rely on experts in human nature and experts in process design and experts in engagement and all these other areas. And we have to be open to those things and imagine new things. We have to imagine new things. um, I think that's part of it. The other thing is we need to get out of the way.
Mm,
Need to not be so precious about our standards and our chosen technologies and our rules and our work hours and our job descriptions and our organizational structure and even our corporate structures. We need to get out of the way and you know, figure out ways to help our employees to be more self-actualized the way that they are in their personal lives and with their consumer devices. And so that will require us to deal with complexity at scale. There are technologies for that. There's hybrid cloud, there's infrastructure as code, there's machine learning, there's natural language processing, there's automation. All of those things help us, but then ultimately we just have to get out of the way and just start to trust more. And I will say, from my perspective, societally, in society, we're at an all-time low around trust and collaboration and communication. There's no magic that IT has there.
yep.
But there is something that IT has there. We have the ability to sort of instrument for good and not for evil, right? We have the ability to create communities and to create data that can be checked and that can fuel our path forward. We have the ability to engage in my organization. We issue a net promoter score survey for every autonomous and in-person interaction that we have. And we have people tell us not only, how did it work, but how did it feel. And we take that on board and we build that into our product design and our interaction design and our processes. It helps us to prioritize our work. We've got to maintain that sort of human connection. There's tooling for that. There's methodology for that, but we can't use the old tools. We can't pour the new wine into the old wineskins at all. And so for me, my partners in this are the head of marketing, the head of social marketing, the head of HR, the sales and sales operations folks. I will tell you, it is exciting to be in their world. I am learning so much about how they engage and how they think about people and how they develop culture. And it's my responsibility to figure out how to embody those things in the technologies and the platforms and the things that we use. And so, we're old dogs, but and these are new tricks. But we've got to open our minds to those things if we're fortunate enough to be in the position of leaders. We've got to think in new ways all over again, and that requires humility and it requires study And it requires engaging others to walk along with us and teach us and show us the way. And that's exhausting work. So we also have to take care of ourselves. At the very same time, we have to rest. We have to say no. We have to say I don't know, rather than trying to have the answer. And then also we have to help. You were talking about that person who's in charge of the school technology. If you see that person, you got to reach out and help. You got to say, hey man, hey, guess what? I work for a big company and I do technical things too. Instead of sniping at you, how can I help you? What can I do to help you? We got to do that across the board. And we also, last thing, the people who have this figured out is Gen Z. Gen
Mhm.
Z, the first fully digital native generation. They never existed. They never had identities that didn't involve digital identity. And we have to listen to them and observe them and know how they work, and take that on board as leaders, as companies, as IT organizations. They're going to be a big percentage of the workforce soon. And in the meantime, they are actually the people who already had a healthy relationship with this digital world that we live in. And we can learn from them instead of saying, why are you playing those games? Let's look at the social discourse and the hierarchies and the knowledge exchange that happens in those games, and figure out how to bring that into our political discourse, our work discourse, et cetera. Right? There's so much opportunity there for us to learn from them.
I think that's such a good point, and it really is the almost take the sarcasm and snark away from everything and really look at what are they doing? How can I learn from this? And how can I leverage this? And you're playing all of these games. Well, why? And how do I get that level of engagement? How do I get that level of collaboration? How do I get that level of human connection with an enterprise IT application, with everything else? That there is something to be gleaned and learned from that. And I think you make a really great point. We're all absolutely exhausted, but there are still areas that we can lean in and jump in and help on. And we may not think we're experts in school technology, but you know what? The person who is struggling would love that little bit of extra, and really approach everyone with that little bit of empathy. We're all going through a lot right now, and everyone is on a different part of the Corona coaster, which is we're all in a different part, and just approach it with empathy. And one thing that I think a lot about of so much that you've gone through in the last 10 months, and from a professional and a personal journey, I'm sure you have had to make really tough decisions, really tough calls. Can you think of in the last 9 months, what's one of the hardest decisions you've had to make?
There have been a lot of hard decisions. I think for me, the hardest decision was to um, shut down access to one of my main physical data centers. We had a COVID outbreak that really negatively affected a number of our team members who worked in that data center.
Mm.
And I needed to stop in-person day-to-day operations there for a multi-week period of time. And it was nerve-wracking. I was worried about the business impact, because there's another few thousand employees who depend on the services running through those data centers, and customers and so on. And so could things run autonomously? Could things run hands off? And so obviously the needs of the few outweighed the needs of the many, and that was the right decision for the people who worked in those data centers. And ultimately, thankfully, our technology and our operations process supported us. We were able to do software defined things. We were able to do remote, hands off, autonomous things that allowed us to work and to thrive, and for the rest of the people to do well. But I had these moments of conscience where I really wanted to ask like a new crew of contractors to come in to the same environment and do the work. And I had to make what for me is not an normally I don't make a lot of moral choices in tech, but it was a moral choice. Thankfully, that certainly worked out, and I even if we'd had service interruptions, I would make that same choice again. Um, so I'm learning from these times. I'm learning. Um, I'm taking my own measure as a leader and a decision maker, and I'm trying to be the person that hopefully my kids think I am.
That's, and you're completely right. And in my role, in your role, we don't often have to make decisions that can affect actually the life of people. And it is in so many ways potentially a life and death situation. And so much of what I do as a marketer, and I can imagine you do as a CIO, is, well, it's not life and death, it's fine. And then
Yeah, it's a phrase. We say that.
and then all of a sudden it's not, but it could be. And it's a hard call and such a brave decision to be able to say, no, I'm going to do what I believe is right for people. And I will deal if something happened, if there's a service interruption, because you know what? At the end of the day, this is what I believe to be right. And this is what I can live with myself on. And that is an incredible decision to make and to have to make. And one I don't think, I don't think you would have ever expected.
No, no, I wouldn't. And I don't share that out of pride. I share it out of fear for all those decisions that are playing out in so many places. I mean, look, that's at the core of everything. Every parent who's trying to decide between being able to go to work and make enough money to pay the rent and and send their kid to school and feeling unsafe about that, but not having a choice. People who have relatives. I have team members who've told me of I've got a relative who's suffering from mental illness and they're alone, and they I know we're not supposed to come visit, but if I don't, I'm worried about people are making these
Awful decisions.
incredibly difficult decisions, and we're kind of marked by those, and so going forward, I also think we will need to do things that have meaning. We that's another thing, right? So like now that now that I know that that's part of leadership,
Mhm.
I'm trying to see those situations and be engaged in things that have more meaning and provide those to my constituents in my world, my customers and partners and employees and so on, because it's important. And I got to say, I was a little blind to that before, and now I see it.
I completely agree with you. Feel like I can keep talking to you forever, and I think we need to have you back to have an entire episode talking about sort of the changing in leadership and lessons in leadership, and um, how this has changed all of us and made us all different types of leaders. Um, but I feel like our producers would kill me if I keep you for several more hours. uh, we try to end everything with something light, which
Mhm.
is rapid fire questions. Are you ready? You have never seen these before.
Bring
Um,
it, bring
okay.
it, Lauren. All right, I'm ready.
Okay. What habit or hobby did you pick up in quarantine?
Baking pumpkin things. I did a fall pumpkin challenge. Every weekend I bake something made with pumpkin I've never made before.
Wow. Any good ones to tell us about?
Well, everything I'm doing is gluten and dairy free. My favorite one was a dark chocolate ganache pumpkin cake that there's still a piece in the fridge.
If you have a recipe anywhere that we can link up in the show notes, or if you want to send me dark chocolate pumpkin cake, that full support of this.
Teach a woman to fish. I will send you the recipe.
Do you have a book or a podcast that you've binged recently?
Oh, I don't mean this to be the shameless plug that it is, but my 13-year-old daughter wrote a book, a novel, and she found a publisher, an actual, real live, legit publisher, and got it published. And I have, and the book just came out. It was a physical copy, just came out as an ebook. And I have read it. I've read the ebook obsessively, like 3 times. Every time, I just cannot believe my daughter wrote this. So it's called A Shining Image by Holly M. Pfeiffer, and it's a legit novel my 13-year-old kid wrote, and I just still can't get over it. I just started reading it again.
That is incredible. Your child is an overachiever at the
I
novel,
know, right?
uh, and I love it. It's a shining image.
Hmm.
We are definitely going to link to that. I feel like I need to download this book and feel a little disappointed in myself for not being a novelist.
I know, right? I know. Can you imagine being the mom? I mean, geez.
Like, it's okay, kids, showing me up already. It's fine. I know what I have in my future.
That's right. I mean, hopefully, it pays the bills at some point. That's my hope. No, I'm actually very, very, very proud of her, and it's actually a good. I'm interested in the story as well. So.
That's awesome. What's one skill that you have that's not on your resume?
I can fold my tongue.
Really?
Hmm.
Feel like that is a very useful skill set.
Yeah, like in half, not curled, but I can fold it in half.
I don't think we've heard that one before. Last question. What is one piece of advice that you will give to up and coming leaders in the IT world?
You just have to keep showing up every day, and eventually they have to give it to you. Don't let anything stop you from showing up every day. Don't stop, don't quit, don't get discouraged. Keep showing up every day. Eventually they have to give it to you.
I love that. I think that is a great lesson for everybody. Wendy, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I'm pretty sure we're going to have you back for another episode. This has been awesome.
Thank you. Thanks, Lauren.
Truth Be Known is brought to you by Talend. A leader in data integration and data integrity, Talend enables every company to find clarity amidst the chaos. Talend Data Fabric brings together in a single platform all the necessary capabilities that ensure enterprise data is complete, clean, compliant, and readily available to everyone who needs it throughout the organization. Learn more at talend.com. That's TALEND.com.